like Men in Black, Zapper, we could be removed of knowing our sex or gender, our race, sexual orientation, age, citizenship, education level, socioeconomic. If we could remove all of our knowledge of who we are in the world, but we know what types of people are out in the world, right? We know there are disabled people and non-disabled people, that there are neurodivergent people and neurotypical people, that there are poor and rich. What kind of policies, social policies, would we agree to under those conditions? So what Rawls thought was, behind this veil of ignorance, no reasonable person would adopt policies that would violate basic human rights. So we would be very conservative. We would want things like universal healthcare and universal education, and we would want the biggest basket of basic human rights such that that basket is consistent with everyone having the same rights. That's what he thought. And so while a person may agree to trans exclusionary policies in sport if they know they're cisgender, that very same person will not agree to those policies behind the veil of ignorance. And for Rawlsian justice, which these two groups are drawing on for their views on fairness in sport, the veil of ignorance is literally everything. So Rawls thought that rational self-interested people wouldn't gamble with basic human rights like participation in sport. Now, he didn't write about sport. I'm just applying Rawls to the right to sport. The problem here is that these people, Lowland, Coggin et al., are using Rawls except the veil of ignorance. And anyone who knows anything about Rawls and how to apply him is that you are just the massive fuck up if you adopt Rawls and you do this mutual agreement thing, but not the veil of ignorance. Right? For him, the veil was literally everything. It was the thing that made everything work. Because if you know who you are, you're going to choose policies that favor you and who you are, and you will choose policies that will disadvantage people who are not you, especially if they are in the minority and you are in the majority, which is the tyranny of the majority. So fairness needs to include things like the veil of ignorance. Okay, so if we're going to think about fairness in sport, what policies would we agree to if we didn't know who we were? And I'm arguing that we would not agree rationally to exclude trans or intersex women from women's sport, because we might be one and we can't rationally agree to a policy that would exclude us from basic human rights. Okay, we're halfway done. So let's talk about discrimination based on natural physical traits, because we do this in sport all the time and we don't think there's any problem with it. So a natural physical trait that we discriminate based on all the time is weight categories. So we do this in combat sports and weightlifting, and we don't think that there's any problem with that. So if you are a 90 kilogram woman, you are not competing against a 50 kilogram woman, because we have figured out that in a sport like weightlifting, that kind of weight difference is unfair. We have deemed that unfair. Now, to a certain extent, this gets kind of arbitrary where you draw the line. But the important point is that for cis natural physical traits, there is never being too much of that trait to be eligible for competition. There is always a greater than. So for weightlifting, boxing, whatever, there's heavyweight or super heavyweight. And so it might be 100 kilo plus, right? There's always that plus. There's always the greater than. And then it's just friggin' open season, okay? The only natural physical trait for which we deem some women ineligible for sport, and it's only women, is testosterone. So you have to show that unaltered endogenous testosterone confers such a competitive advantage, way more than any other natural physical trait, that you have to exclude women with high testosterone. And I'm going to show you that that argument is literally impossible and it's nonsense on its face. So why do we even have these testosterone policies? Well, the claim is that men's performances, either on average or like world record peak performances, are about 10 to 12% bigger, stronger, faster. And that is true. And the claim is that The difference between men and women is that men have, on average, about 10 times as much testosterone than women. That is also true. The implication, though, is that advantages on the range of 10 to 12% are unfair. The CAS panel even said this, and I'm going to quote them later, but they said that an advantage on the range of 10 to 12% justifies separating men from women. That's the justification, is that that advantage is too much. I want you to think about the range of elite women's bodies. Every one of these women is a world elite level athlete. Look at the differences in the body types. I want to focus on two people just to make a point. Guesses in the chat what sport this is, and then guesses in the chat what sport this is. So this athlete here, consider her competing against her, and let's pick two different sports. So this gives it away. She is a gymnast, and these are the wrist wraps for the parallel bars. So let's consider this very short gymnast who will be under 5 feet compared to this athlete who is probably 6 foot or taller. She is a high jumper. So let's consider the high jumper competing against the gymnast in gymnastics. Well, the physics of tumbling are such that the sport selects for very compact, powerful bodies. The interesting thing is that the gymnastics is the only sport for which we have a minimum age in the Olympics. There is such a thing in gymnastics as age doping, where countries will give younger girls older birth certificates as a way of cheating. China got caught a few years ago doing this. And the reason that they have the age minimum is that the forces put on gymnast bodies can really mess up growth plates. So they have this minimum age, but it still selects for very tiny bodies. And that's why you don't usually see 24-year-old gymnasts. Is usually they grew out of the height range to be an elite gymnast. So if this 6 foot person were to compete against this short gymnast in gymnastics, the advantage the short person has is a hell of a lot higher than 10 to 12%, just based on their height. Conversely, in high jump, this person would be non-competitive at even a city level versus this tall person, because high jumping selects for being tall, just like basketball and volleyball does. Volleyball, in fact, had to create a specific position for a short person because the average height of volleyball players is way over 6 feet. Like I'm 6 foot, I'm too short to be a volleyball player. So height, for example, confers massive competitive advantages, way more than the 10 to 12% that we are claiming are unfair. So let me show you the average height of rowers over time. You can see the Olympic medals, this very sharply upward line, and it's not because women are getting taller on average over time. That hasn't changed. What's happened is we've gotten better at knowing and identifying that tallness is a benefit for rowing. A friend of mine has a gold medal from the '92 Olympics for rowing eights, and she's 6'4", and she wears 3-inch heels, and you can guess that I love taking photos next to her. So rowers are tall, 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 and height confers a huge advantage in that sport. So people love to talk about my body, so let's talk about my body. So this is me at Manchester. They look at me and they're like, oh, look at this big body. It's so unfair. They call it the eyeball test. And transphobes love this photo in particular. First, they refer to me as man-spreading, like go fuck yourselves. Our shorts are extremely tight and there's padding in the crotch that just basically forces your legs open. So you have to actively want to close your legs, and that takes energy, and we're trying to save energy. The second thing they say is, oh my God, look how much bigger she is compared to her. Okay, she's like 60. We don't compete against each other. Then they say, well, look at Veronica next to this woman. We're the same height. This is Kirsten Harrop Sovang. She took third place. That's her right here. We're friends, by the way. We're the same height. She's the Danish elite champion. And I want to draw your attention to something. Look right here. She's wearing my logo sticker, right? She chose to do that. So she's up there supporting me. She really supports me. And yet transphobes use this photo of us as like eyeball test evidence of unfairness, which is ridiculous. Okay. Then they also love to use this photo and they try to say like, oh, like this woman's looking over disapprovingly at me. Like, no, come on, she's looking into the crowd. So me and Kirsten are having fun just talking. This is another friend of mine, Carolyn Herrichhausen. She's the woman I beat for the first world championship. But I want to just compare my body against another elite track cyclist, Elise Litley. She's Dutch. She is an inch taller, 10 pounds heavier. I have never gone to the Olympics. I'm not going to. I've never been to an elite world championship. I go to an age group world championship, the Masters World Championships. She has an Olympic gold medal. I do not. So we have pretty similar body types. She's a little bit bigger. So you can't just say, look at her, it's unfair. Bodies don't work that way. Sport doesn't work that way. What if I were to show you this photo? So this is Elise here some years ago. And then this is Christina Vogel. I forget her name. And so you might say, holy shit, look at this tall, big ass woman. It's so unfair. Well, what about this photo, right? Same people. This is Rebecca James of the UK, Christina Vogel, Elise Litley, right? So you can't just look at a body and a photo and know who's the better athlete. Sport does not work that way. In fact, comparing Christina to Elise, Christina is 10 inches shorter, 70 pounds lighter, and she was the dominant athlete of their time. They're both retired. Let's look at some men. This is Robert Fosterman, also known as Quadzilla. He has a genetic mutation where his leg muscles don't stop growing as he continues to train them. So he's 5'9", 200 pounds versus Jason Kenny, who's an inch taller, but 25 pounds lighter. And you can look at the leg difference, right? And you would think bigger legs is faster in a power event like ours. Except again, Kenny was dominant compared to Fosterman. Size is not that simple. You can't just look at an athlete and know. What about this bro? He is the single most decorated Olympian of all time. And we refer to him positively as a biological freak, right? Tons of news stories refer to him as a freak positively. What about this guy, Usain Bolt? Has 3 world records in all 3 of his events, still holds them, won 8 gold medals in 3 successive Olympics, right? The first sprinter to ever do that. He truly dominated his sport, just like Phelps did. And we celebrate that. But why is it when it comes to an intersex woman or a trans woman, suddenly we're suspicious? So with Caster Semenya, people crafted policies to exclude her. So a lot of the people in this debate, this controversy, never want you to look at the actual data, which is why I always want you to look at the data. So look at Bolt's winning advantage in the 2012 Olympics. So in the 100 meters, he won over second place by 1.25%, and then the 200 by 0.6%. Semenya's winning advantage was only 0.26%. So Bolt won his 100-meter gold by a margin of 5 times greater than Semenya did, and yet we celebrate Bolt and we seek to exclude Semenya. Why is that? Why is it that we celebrate exceptional men, but we are suspicious of exceptional women? I mean, the short answer is misogyny and sexism, but I mean, I can give you the long answer. Now, I noted that height often confers a very large advantage, and I've already brought up high jump. So let's talk about high jump. So in the 2016 Rio Olympics, the average podium height was almost 6'2". The tallest athlete in the event was over 6'3", and 10th place was over 10 inches shorter. 10.5 inches between first and 10th place in high jump. And we call that fair, right? So